Greetings, friends. Welcome to Breaking Change, the favorite podcast of at least a dozen people in Argentina. I had last on version 5. We discussed how a solicitor of podcast charting services mentioned to me that Breaking Change is the number 14 tech podcast on the charts in Argentina. And so I was joking about that. And I actually heard from several people in Argentina that say that they listen to the podcast and share it with their friends. So thank you to the handful of folks who wrote in. Ariel was one of them, and he even mentioned that he tells all his friends to listen to it. So I should take that as a hint that maybe I should enunciate and talk more clearly, but I'd rather just think of this as hard mode English, where I mumble and don't necessarily speak clearly or cogently. Well, it's good to be back for another version. This is version 6, where pausing doesn't pause. I will explain later in the main meaty newsy section of what I got to talk about today. But before that, we've got all kinds of, tasks and to-dos to check off on our agenda, starting with life updates, what's new. So I mentioned last time on version 5, I'm trying to do a better job of not calling this a weekly podcast, because I have committed to not follow anyone's rules about podcasts, not even my own. So I will do this when I feel like it, but it does make it really difficult to talk about it as anything other than an anthology with titles. So on a previous episode, I discussed that Becky was having a retreat from her Build with Becky Year 1 cohort of clients, and it went great. A brand new, ever more complex, a $7 billion resort facility. It's in sort of it had a soft open last year, but it's open now, and the opening is still quite soft. It's kind of a construction zone, but they had a great time. It's beautiful. Got a lot done. I got to see several of the ladies who I'd known from a prior life, a couple of whom may even be listening right now. They walk among us. Well, one of those nights while I was in bachelor mode, because Becky was actually staying over there in the bungalow that they rented. I am saying bungalow, realizing there might be a proper definition for the word bungalow as in terms of what it is, but it's a vacation apartment, but with like 4 bedrooms that, in the modern vacation rental. I guess best practices is it's all about heads and beds. So maximize the number of beds and the number of heads that can rest upon those beds to maximize your revenue. And this is it was a VRBO thing and then an Airbnb thing, and now this corporate complex is in on that too. So I have no idea. I didn't get to go into their they call it a flat. I didn't get to go in the bungalow and see how large it was. But assuming that every square foot was a bed, it could fit 6 or 7 of those. So still not small. So anyway, one of those nights I was on my own and I was feeling lonely. And so I do what I do. And I had plans to go over to my brother Jeremy's house for dinner. He was very kind, cooked me dinner, made me a homemade spaghetti with a pasta grinder. What do you shredder? When you turn the crank and then pasta happens. I'm over 25% Italian, if you believe it. I should probably know what that is. But he had suggested we play some classic Super Nintendo games, and he already had a couple in mind, but I didn't know that, and so I hit the action button on my iPhone 15 Pro Max. I hit the action button, which I have, and when you hit the action button, it just says, hey, hold the action button to do something, which is a really useful use for a button. So I held the action button for the 500 milliseconds. And when you hold the action button on my iPhone, I have it set up to open the ChatGPT voice chat. It's basically Siri alt mode. It's like Siri if she was conversant. Siri is non-gendered. I think they started down the path of Siri being gendered. This is an interesting kind of like dichotomy, and like, all the new products are sort of not named obviously gendered things, like Copilot it's a role, it's a product name. Gemini, kind of, that's Google's new one. That's kind of, rides the line. ChatGPT is not only not gendered, but it's barely English. So Siri, at some point Apple declared it to be not gendered, and it very early on, if not right away, the UK version I think was voiced by a male actor. In any case, so Siri is not very conversant. ChatGPT is like having a conversation, and the fact that it streams GPT-4 so slowly, they had to work so many, I may have mentioned this on a previous version, but like they work in so many verbal affectations that it really feels like you're talking to somebody. And I had a blowaway, to use an Apple jargon, experience talking to my GPT-4 on the way to my brother's house. I started the conversation, got in the car. I'm in CarPlay now. It is conversing back and forth. Every time I speak, and then I pause, it starts speaking and so forth. And I asked it, give me some Super Nintendo games that are cooperative, that are fun to play. And the GPT responded with a few games, and one of them was, I think, Final Fight 3. And I was like, that's a great example. Like, give me some more beat 'em up games, because those are kind of dumb fun. You can just kind of go walk left to right and mashing buttons and have a drink, have a chat. And it started in its reply telling me about Streets of Rage, which if you're a gamer, real gamers know that Streets of Rage is not a Super Nintendo game. It was a Sega Genesis exclusive title, maybe also in arcades. And so it was suggesting Streets of Rage to me. And it even was saying it's a Sega Genesis game, and I'd asked for Super Nintendo. Now, if you've ever used ChatGPT or one of these other AI chatbots, you've probably experienced them being wrong or them hallucinating nonsense. And typically, to get any sort of corrective on that, you have to call them out. You have to say, hey, that's actually mistaken. And then they'll apologize immediately, which is a huge upgrade over how most humans react, frankly, to being called wrong. And then it'll try to correct, or sometimes it'll say, hey, I'm sorry, and then give the exact same, reply. This time I was all ready. I didn't even listen to the other 3 recommendations. I was so ready to tell it, hey, you're wrong about the Streets of Rage thing. And it said in its own reply, after listing the 4th recommendation, hey, you know what? I just realized that Streets of Rage is actually a Sega Genesis game. Sorry about that. So in the course of its own reply, it came back around and self-audited the thing that it had just said. And if it's just a statistical model predicting the next word that it speaks, our our streams of consciousness, could also be, I guess, qualified as such. And they also do that. I'm doing it right now. But still, I'd never seen GPT self-correct in the middle of a response. So that was pretty cool. And anyway, GPT is my friend now, and I don't feel lonely anymore, because I just hold down my action button for the requisite 500 milliseconds, and I have a little chat about anything. Really, about anything. I am very concerned about my history leaking onto the internet, and I shouldn't be, because I should just know that it's already probably publicly addressable. Even if I click delete, I doubt it's a real delete. Probably best not to think too much about that. So anyway, had a wonderful evening. We played Zombies Ate My Neighbors, which was my brother's suggestion. And that was a game that came out, I think, in 92 or 93. And we weren't, 93. And we weren't allowed to play it as kids. I remember Nintendo Power covered it, and we had every Nintendo Power magazine, But we weren't allowed to play Zombie Ate My Neighbors. It was too sacrilegious looking, probably, to my parents. I don't even know if we chanced it. I think we probably saw it at Blockbuster, and we're like, you know what? It's not worth the political capital to fight for this one, buddy. We're going to go and we're going to rent Battletoads again and just get our asses handed to us in 10 minutes. anthropomorphic toads being violent is okay, but when we call them zombies, it's not okay. The game itself was actually kind of fun, but its difficulty spike is ridiculous, and it feels almost like a carbon clone of Toe Jam and Earl. And I don't know what the story is, but if you played Toe Jam and Earl, which is incidentally another Sega Genesis exclusive, it's kind of like a less put together, less. I don't think Toe Jam and Earl is art. I don't think it's a great game, but it seemed better than Zombies Ate My Neighbors, and Zombies Ate My Neighbors definitely felt like one of those where you're exploring a map with a buddy and having to dodge a lot of bad things and then collect a lot of good things. So yeah, so we had fun. Another life news, had a day where my wrist was really hurting after I don't know what, a weightlifting thing or a golf thing, and my wrist was hurting, and I carry around this ornament called the Apple Watch Ultra 2. So I decided I'm going to give my wrist a break. I'm going to put this Apple Watch on its charger. I'm going to walk around my house just device naked, because we check in our phones at the door when we come into the house typically, unless we need to take a picture or something. And I over the course of the next couple of hours, completely device free, reading a book or whatever, Becky was out, and I was like, man, if she needs to get a hold of me, even somebody in my tight-knit family, would she figure out a way to do that? And what would those ways be? Now, we're in a house where I've got like 13 HomePods, 15 HomePods. I don't even know. It's a multi-generational household because we have every kind of HomePod, and they're all over the place. I've got HomePods behind me right now staring at me. Actually, I got a third one for reasons that I will explain in a moment. Also plugged in for some reason in this room. And I was thinking, like, how would she get a hold of me? And there's a couple things came to mind if it was an emergency. One, Becky could log into the Ring app and panic the system. That would get my attention for sure. It would also wake me up, but like, would she ever think to do that in the throes of an emergency? No. Two, she could use the intercom feature, because I've got intercom turned on, which would transmit her voice to all of our HomePods in the house. But it's just a feature you never would think to use unless you were already inside the house. Like, it's a HomeKit thing. Most people probably wouldn't even realize it works. It's supposed to work, but I don't know that I trust that it would work. But beyond that, there's not much else. And it just feels to me like there should be a way by now, what is it? 2016 to 2014, 8 years in, there should be a way that HomePods can, receive calls maybe from like a select number of people, and ringling. I know they do a little bit of notification sounding, because if you send a text message with one saying, hey dingus, send a text to so-and-so, and then that person replies, it'll do the little text ding upon getting the reply. You can also ask it to read your messages, but it can't, there's no phone ringer. It really does feel to me like there needs to be a panic button or some way to, if we check our phones at the door and we have our watches charging in another room, we do have like a monitored alarm system. So, hey, don't get fresh, anybody. Don't get any ideas that you're going to pull one over in our domicile. But in terms of, I'm talking about burglary now. Get your mind out of the gutter. What the fuck? So, if there was an honest to God emergency between the hours of, call it 11 p.m. and 7 a.m., I just wouldn't know. And I'm mostly at peace with that. But if Becky and I are apart, or if, Jeremy's traveling or something, or, if I've got an active and open Instacart order, any of these sort of things where you need to be available, I don't think I've got a solution to that. So if anyone has any clever ideas, let me know. There's probably a hinky way to do this by MacGyver it with duct tape and the shortcuts app, and maybe that app Pushcut that lets you use like kind of webhooks to get into your house. But then like, what am I doing? Am I writing like a custom app for Becky to like hit a button, you know, to hit a URL to go and make a ding-a-ling sound? I don't know. Maybe. Anyway, let me know if you got any thoughts. That's podcast at Searles, which is spelled like pearls, but with an S, .co. Other life news going on. It feels weird. Tomorrow is the day that we are starting our very first real remodel renovation. When we bought the house, there was a lot of work to do. We did all the floors. We repainted it inside and out. There's some things to fix up. There's some light demo. And it was expensive and it was time consuming, but we weren't living in the house through it. And tomorrow starts our bathroom renovation, and that's going to be 2 days of demo. And I made a cute little schedule for the contractors that I'm sure will go out the window immediately because I don't know that any of them have computers. They all claim to look at it. So it's going to be noisy, and it means like we had to clear out everything from the master bath. And because the only way into our main closet, primary, I don't know exactly where we're landing at in terms of, primary bedroom real estate lingo in the postmaster era. Anyway, you get the idea. The bathroom that I use every day, the main one, as well as the closet attached to that one, the only way to the closet is through the bathroom. So that means that we had to empty out absolutely everything from the bathroom because it's going to get demolished. And I guess I assume if I walk behind the house, it'll just be a big old hole in the wall like Superman popped out. Is my expectation. And if that's not what demo means, demolition, I will be disappointed. So we emptied all that out. Becky, the thing about it is it's so much bigger than the other bathrooms in the house that it didn't even make sense. Like as soon as I spent 30 seconds thinking about how to do this, it was clear that for the sake of our marriage, we would move from one primary bathroom into 2 guest bathrooms. So she's in what is usually our guest bathroom and with clothes overflowing into the guest room. And there's a Jack and Jill. This is more real estate lingo, a Jack and Jill bathroom that connects 2 of the other bedrooms upstairs. Jack and Jill being like, that kind of adjoining bathroom between the 2, and there's 2 sinks and so forth. And so I've unloaded all of my crap from the bathroom as well as like a week's worth of clothing into that one. And so it just felt so weird moving out of your own bathroom into separate places. Like, is this what splitting up would be? I hope not. Well, you know what? We were playing music and we were having a good time. So, as long as we feel good about it, whatever. It was pleasant. And it was nice because all of our stuff was already extremely well segmented in that, like, I had one thing of soap and a toothbrush and some shaving cream and very few other items. So it took Becky a little bit longer to clear out her space, but she did a bang up job. And actually now the bathroom looks so fucking clean that I'm like, do we even need to remodel? Let's just empty it out every few years and it'll feel like new. And it's kind of how it does feel. I am getting stressed though, because as soon as tomorrow hits and like the bathroom becomes a construction zone, if I have to get up and pee in the middle of the night, what's to stop me from just walking right into the bathroom in the dark? And then it's like, what if I stumble right out the hole in the wall that the Kool-Aid man left when he dove through and yelled, "Oh yeah." Is that how I go? I don't want that to be how I die. That would be one of those Justin died and in the obituary, we're not going to explain why, which is going to make everyone think it's fentanyl, but like, honestly, it's how he'd rather it be. And they would be right. So if I mysteriously die in the next month, it's not going to be for reasons that we're going to disclose as a family. I'm just putting that out there. So that's life news. I'm not sure that we've had a single version of this podcast that for which I went more than like 30 minutes without discussing mortality to some extent. But if I do have to pee in the middle of the night, I think I'm just gonna have to like walk mostly naked across the second floor. And in Florida, in new housing developments, you are closer to your neighbors in the next mansion-sized home over than I've ever been in an apartment complex. Like, it is, you see everything and they see everything, especially if only one is illuminated. So hopefully the automated blinds will close at the proper time and not open too early the next couple weeks here. All right. So let's call it a life. Follow up. I got a complaint. First complaint about swears on the podcast. Despite the RSS having the explicit XML element toggled to true, someone didn't like me swearing, and they let me know about it. So to you, I say, I am sorry that you don't like my swearing. It probably means that those words mean something to you in a way that they don't mean anything to me. Or maybe I'm just a worse person. Both can be true. It reminded me of a blog post years ago that Scott Hanselman wrote. I think it was something like profanity is not effective. And he was slagging on a couple of folks I know named DHH. I guess I know all three of them, but DHH, David Heinemeier Hansen, the Ruby on Rails fella. There I am with fella again. Zach Holman being another. Zach was an early GitHubber and gave a lot of talks around the world. And it was a very good speaker. Zach's a wonderful person. Both Zach and DHH use a lot of swears. They are youths by comparison to Scott Hanselman, who's a generation older, I'd say. If not literally, then definitely spiritually, but also, I don't know. Anyway, Scott didn't like their swears, said it would have been more effective for them to come up with like better language or proper words, or that it was unprofessional. And, they both, I think, said what, I would say, which is they are useful expressions when they emphasize the degree of, or emphasize or reflect, I suppose, like the degree of passion that one feels about a thing. Most of these swear words have lost all their original meaning. He mentions even in the post, right? Like the word fuck is 9 parts of speech, depending. And I get it. I grew up in a really religious household where we had to use proper language and so forth. And I think it's important to be able to speak properly because that is a great way to be socially mobile economically. I remember my first client at Pillar Technology in 2010. I was in Farmington Hills for 6 months, building an application with a great team. And we were there, we built the app, and everyone, like, we were talking about swearing 6 months in, and I swear a lot, as you may have fucking noticed. Everyone on the team, when I mentioned, like, oh yeah, I swear like a sailor. They're like, what, you? And they thought I was some goody two shoes. But like what I really was somebody who was afraid of losing his job by saying the wrong thing literally ever. And so I was like, well, no, I just, I work at a client site. So do you. Like I try to be professional. And I think what I saw in Scott's post, now that I think about it, is professionalism virtuous, or is professionalism, must it be seen in like a relative context? Like, is it a form of control by a community or by an authority to mandate our conduct or coerce our conduct in a certain way? That's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it that's totally valid as well is a certain amount of professionalism is necessary to build an inclusive environment where everyone feels welcome. Because if we're all just, rage monsters and, I remember this in the post, he kind of like conflates swearing with, sexually lewd, language and imagery. And of course that's much less defensible because it's like illegal in the workplace, because it's hop, skip, and a jump away from sexual harassment. I don't think they're the same thing, of course, but if I were to start a business of just people, once I felt a power dynamic emerge, I would be more cautious about swearing, right? Because to some people it reads, when you're in a position of power, just reading like what neutral language might suddenly sound louder or sound more forceful if it's your boss saying it. And so violent language or expressive language or passionate language or volatile language might be the best word for it. That can sound really intense and scary. And I certainly would not want that. So this is just us hanging out. This is a zone where I'm letting loose a little bit. And if that makes you uncomfortable, fortunately, there are at least 13 better podcasts in Argentina's tech category that you could listen to instead of this one. For fuck's sake. Anyway. Got a lot of comments about the Vision Pro, of course, because I've been talking about it a lot. One piece of follow-up is somebody asked me if I've been using it at coffee shops or the like, out and about. And the funny thing about that is I actually have been working from home more because the Vision Pro, especially once I put on my Bobo M2 custom strap situation, which is kind of more like it's closer to the metal light bulb helmet hat that Doc Brown was wearing when Marty first goes back to 1955. It's closer to that ergonomically than the original solo knit weave strap that comes with the Vision Pro. It's not attractive and it would take up my whole backpack. And I don't want to change straps every time I go out of the house. And so that's, oddly enough, that's the reason that I don't do it. Not because I have shame or an excess of dignity. But yeah, I've been working from home more, and because, you can just dial away the immersion, I can go to the moon and I can go to other places. So I've felt way less compulsion to go and work from other locations. And when I do, I'm content just bringing my laptop because probably worth mentioning. It's now been 3 weeks and 2 days since Vision Pro launched. And I have easily clocked, let's see, that's 23 days. I have clocked probably 130 hours on it, just working, just programming. I've been programming a lot, and all but 2 hours of it has been with the Vision Pro on. It is immersive to me. It's a bigger screen than the other screens, and it sucks me in, and I just cannot distract myself. I play my music off to the side. I'm looking at a big fucking thing of code, and in a way that on my laptop screen, I'm just checked out enough psychologically, or even at my computer desk, or maybe physically uncomfortable enough, that could be part of it, that whenever I hit a point of discomfort, either psychologically or physically, I want to hit Command Tab and go check my messages or check my RSS reader or my email. And those all derail me. And I just have not experienced nearly as many derails when I got the Vision Pro headset on. So, yep, doing it mostly from home. Haven't taken it out into public yet. Have ridden on a couple airplanes with it. Will probably, when I'm traveling for an extended period of time, I'm going to be in Japan for a while. Will probably take it with me and work with it everywhere I go there. It hasn't launched in Japan, so I'm going to be the most otaku weeb anyone's seen for quite a while. And hopefully at Ruby Kaigi down in Okinawa, I'll be able to demo it for a few friends who might be interested. Let's see. Another bit of follow-up. In version 5, if you notice the audio is weird, it is because I fucked up the audio. As a one-man show, I suppose that's obvious that if there's anything happening, it's probably my fault. I won't get into it. I use Logic Pro to mix the show, and I've got a template that I mix from. But it was the first time that I'd recorded a track inside of Logic, as opposed to creating an audio recording in QuickTime Player, which I'm doing now, and I've done all the other times. And it led me down a path of clicking buttons, which you should never do. And it resulted in me applying all of the plugins that I added in what is called dual mono mode, because microphones are mono. They don't have stereo channels. And so typically you got to sum up the audio waveforms. And this is handled automatically to create a stereo track from a mono source. But I clicked dual mono because I'm like, well, what is a stereo track made from a mono source except for two monos? And what I didn't realize is that means that the plugins apply to either the left or the right side or some coupled version of them. And so some of my plugins were right and some of them were wrong and some of them were left. And so it resulted in weird audio artifacting and an inability for the plugins to operate correctly. And so my solution, I could detect this. The shit was sounding weird. The exports were coming out funny. And so like my solution was, instead of look at the existing plugins, like what if I bought and added more of them? So I added more of them. It was, just like programming, when you start from a loose foundation that isn't really stable and your impulse is to keep adding more shit on top, you just create a Jenga tower, because now like any fixes that you do on the 15th floor are so precarious. But if you change anything now, once you've gone down that path, if you change anything in those fundamental settings, whether it's the equalizer or the compressor in audio speak, now the shit that you did in the 14th floor in the like 8th plugin to compensate for those fuck ups, now it's going to be even further off, because that compensation will now be wrong. So just yet, lesson number 972 in my career, that when the foundation is weak, do not respond by adding more shit. Spend the time, figure out what's wrong with the foundation, redo it if you have to, before you just slather on more mud onto the ball. So apologies for version 5's piss poor audio quality. I had some wonderful help from one of my favorite people, Gary Bernhardt. Gary is a real, can I say he's a real mensch? I am 2.7% Ashkenazi. I don't know if that entitles me to be able to use Yiddish. I'm not 1,000% sure that mensch is Yiddish, but I feel like it is. Anyway, Gary's great. He actually downloaded the whole fucking Logic project, which I'm sure took up half his fucking hard drive. God damn. And he looked at it all, and he complimented several of my things, and then gave me a voluminous amount of things to work on. So version 6's mix might take me a little while to turn this one around. I'm recording this on February 25th, which is a Sunday. And so by Thursday or so, you'll get it, even though normally my turnaround is an hour. Yep. So sorry about that. I will try to get better. I'm learning. Speaking of podcasts, Mike McQuaid, who is a friend of the pod, and frequent listener of this one, because he live texts me as he listens to it. Mike was on another podcast that I love, Changelog and Friends, from the Changelog network. Changelog is a programmer focused, especially open source focused podcast empire network. And Friends is a channel that they just started, or a series that they just started, where they talk to people that they know and have more like laid back conversations. And Mike, he is the lead maintainer of Homebrew, which is the most popular way to install command line interfaces, like 35 million users in the Mac platform. And Mike has recently launched a new business called Workbrew, along with John Britton, both previously from GitHub. And Mike went on to talk about it. Mike also just, I am realizing through this 2-hour podcast that I listened to over there, I haven't seen Mike in person since 2019, when we were both in Kaiki for in Fukuoka. Mike and I are kind of like, we sound like we're brothers from another mother. His was more Scottish. I will give him that. He's got a cooler accent for sure. But we both have a real appreciation for an attention to detail. And so if you feel a kindred spirit with me about mindset and philosophy around programming, as well as just about user experience, about how to comport oneself and how to think about the problems in the world and in your life. Good podcast episode to listen to. So that's another thing. One thing he talked about that I think about a lot, but I don't think to ever mention to anyone, is he mentioned, one, he's a Safari user on purpose, and I am a fellow Safari user on purpose. Safari has been my favorite browser since it launched on the Mac, 2003, and because it's so minimal. It does what it says on the tin. They focus on it being really fast. They don't add a lot of user Chrome. There's no fluff, and it's still really fast. And Chrome, I had been using when Chrome first launched, was really fast, and then it got really not fast. And now it's, it feels like bloatware that's like kind of a portal into an ad network as much as anything else. Yes, it's got a cool extension ecosystem, and yes, the dev tools are a little bit better, but I love Safari. And he mentioned that he's a tab minimalist, Mike did, that he curates his tabs throughout the day. And I wish I did that. I feel just a tinge of worry that the shoddy history feature in Safari, and if Chrome had a good history tab, like I might actually switch. But Safari's inability to like show me things that I've been looking at clearly when I go through 400, 500 tabs a day at least, makes me feel scarcity around closing them. Normally, like I close every window. Like when I open an app, I will typically close every other thing. But with Safari in particular, I will let tabs pile up while I'm working. And I'm not particularly disciplined about making the windows, multiple windows, but each with many tabs, making that mean anything. I kind of just reach a point of frustration, and then I'll pop open a new window, and then that becomes lousy with tabs as well. A couple things have worked for me. One is the latest version, Sonoma, of macOS added I think it's file add to dock is the command in the app. And it creates, just like add to home screen in iPhone, it creates a little app wrapper for just that website. And if you're already logged in, it'll automatically slurp up your cookie. So you'll still be logged in there. There's just no address bar. There's no tab interface. You're just in it. And I've been using that for the Synology dashboard, because Synology's like administrative UI actually looks kind of like an operating system. It looks like a little Linux desktop, so it actually works really well as an app. I've also been using it for Stripe's dashboard, because I've got a similar, like I've had it open all day, every day. So rather than have it open 20 tabs, I may as well keep it open in its own app. And I have found that has cut down the like root number of tabs that I have open at any given time quite a lot. I wish I could do that for my dev server. I just have too many situations where I need 2 tabs or 3 tabs open, or I need to get to the URL bar to manually hack it. Let's see. Oh yeah, the only other solution, I mentioned I have 2 ways of working with this. And this is something that I've been doing since, I don't know, whatever the first version of macOS 10 was that tried to remember your shit being open after a reboot. And it still does this. And there's like one preference that will, like, on an app by app basis, ask it not to reopen all the windows from the app from the last time. And I always turn that on. But before I quit an app, especially a tabbed app where I'm consuming a lot, is I will press and hold Command Shift W to close all the tabs and the window. And I will do that. And then once there are no more windows or documents open for that application, then I will hit Command Q. And that is the best way to live your life if you use a Mac every day. Full stop. So Command Shift W, it's awesome muscle memory. If you fuck up and you hit it and you're in Safari, you can always go to the file menu or the windows and reopen last closed window, and you'll get all of it back. And it won't even reload the pages because it knows people do that, and they'll bring it back for you. So that's my only little minimalism tip. But I was excited to hear Mike on the podcast talk a little bit about his essentialist beliefs and how that inspires how he works. And I felt a lot of kinship. So thanks for that, Mike. Well, that about does us for follow-up. So it's probably a good time to bring the pun of the day. The pun of the day is brought to us by our only sponsor, Aaron Patterson, also known as Tender Love, who has contributed all of these puns, despite I am not sure ever listening this far into any of the episodes. Aaron, you see, Aaron is a creator, and like me, he speaks twice and listens once. But also, he unlike me is not just like walking around his existence with a podcast going in his ear all day long to kind of drown out the voice in his head. So no hard feelings, but he offers these puns up. And what I do is I will usually the night before, when I realize I might record the next morning, say, hey man, I need a pun. And I know it's better if I give him a prompt. So I say, hey, maybe about this or this or this. He does give me these puns, but I feel like I'm making Aaron do free labor and I'm adding to his burdens. So I thought it would be good to sponsor Aaron. So Aaron wrote a really good blog post. So this is, I guess, maybe a sponsor read. He wrote a really good blog post. I'm not going to tell you about it. I'm just going to tell you to go look at it. And it's at tenderlovemaking.com. So just trust me. Just go to that website, tenderlovemaking.com, and you get to read Aaron's cool blog posts. Just do it. Do it now. Pause. Do it. Yeah, so we get to read his pun, and then we're going to rank it against all the other previous 5 puns. It is sent, as always, via iMessage in invisible ink. And I'm going to hover over it now. I'm going to take a breath. And I'm going to read it with my mouth words. I'm really glad Americans are finally embracing tap to pay. It was real touch and go there for a while. Oh, fuck. I'm really glad. Jesus. Well, that was the first. It must be good because it was the first time I broke while reading Aaron's pun. Fuck. I collect myself. You're a professional podcaster, damn it. I'm really glad Americans are finally embracing tap to pay. It was real touch and go there for a while. Okay, that was a 90% didn't break, but there was a little tickle in my throat. All right, so copy paste time. We're copying it into the spreadsheet. Version 6, February 25th, 2024. Where does this rank? I gotta say, this is it being the first one to make me laugh is maybe a sign of its quality. Maybe I'm just in a good mood though, so I should consider it on the merits as I drag it to first place with prejudice. First place is currently Breaking Change. Sorry, I don't carry cash from version 1. In third place, we've got, I wonder what tapas restaurants have to say about this EU App Store ruling, which is about as overwrought as that episode was when I realized I probably shouldn't just talk about EU and Apple policy intersections for an hour. I will twist myself into the same sort of knots that they have twisted themselves into. This is more my speed. So yeah, number 1, the best pun to date on Breaking Change, version 6, Aaron Patterson's. I'm really glad Americans are finally embracing tap to pay. It was real touch and go there for a while. Man, that reminds me of during COVID, how, I was living in Japan for the first 6 months of the COVID with Becky, and we were in a rural area, and in Japan, QR codes were a thing because Asia adopted them generally for lots of purposes, like QR code based payments. The year leading up to it, PayPay was a Japanese payment processor that was QR based, where you'd scan a vendor's QR code and then you'd pay them money, I guess. I never used it because I think I don't know if it had to be tied to a Japanese bank account, but you know what? The reason I didn't fucking sign up for it is I was an American, goddammit, and Americans don't scan QR codes. And there was even a Tumblr. Remember? It was pictures of people scanning QR codes.tumblr.com. And it had been there for years. And the joke was that there were no posts yet. And I would send people the joke whenever QR codes came up, because QR codes were so obviously a failure outside of Soviet China. I said Soviet China. I meant to say communist China. Let the record show. Sorry, I'm slap happy from just how good this pun was. Yeah, so QR codes, no one used them outside of the People's Republic of China, and apparently some corners of Japan that were, trying to build an app ecosystem similar to China's. And I came home, 6 months into COVID. I was like, what I need is some freedom. It's not actually how I felt at all. I was terrified. I came back to America, sat down at a socially distanced outdoor restaurant after a while, after kind of realizing that this is just life now. And they handed me a QR code thing, or there was one at the table. And I was like, did I just Sliders? Am I in an episode of Sliders? Did I go through a portal to the alternate dimension where Americans got snookered into using QR codes for shit? And the answer was no. You all dropped the ball while I was gone, is what I mean to say. And so now we have QR codes everywhere. And at least the silver lining is at least we also really picked up in usage for tap to pay. Because Apple Pay is awesome and I use it everywhere. And hell, it's even QR codes already being a thing in Asia. Apple Pay NFC payments are also generally pretty accepted in Japan now too, which is pretty great. Not a super credit cardy culture though, so there's lots of cash only places still. But QR codes, man. Well, moving right along. Let's thank you, Aaron, for your number one pun. News items. 2 news items today. One's a quickie. He says, usually incorrectly, about how long things take him to do. Post-quantum cryptography for iMessage. This is I'll link to one of the stories about this, but one of the things that Apple has been saying about iMessage as a protocol is that they can't open it up. They can't do the back door that the UK wanted to do in the name of child porn. Or stopping child porn. The law was either pro or anti. I didn't read it. They won't open it up for the FBI after the San Bernardino shooting. They won't. And the reason is that if you give a backdoor to the good guys, they could actually be the bad guys, or they could just fuck up and leak the key, or a bad guy could find the key. So there's no way to securely have encryption and also have a way for some people to be able to break it. And we know this. And this is a techie fella, a techie person podcast. So you're probably aware that encryption between two parties, for it to be secure, can't just be read by somebody else. And Apple has beaten this drum over and over again as a reason for no interoperability in iMessage, because unless they own all of the clients, and there was a recent scandal about this third-party app called Beeper, and Beeper Mini in particular for Android, to break down the blue bubble wall between the platforms. And Apple said then, it's this is about security. This is about unless we own all the clients, we can't attest that the way that they're encrypting and decrypting these messages is, maybe they're adhering to the cryptographic standard because they're conversant with the other apps. But who's to say that you don't also have a keylogger installed or something else in the code that's doing something bad? It also, to have that interoperability, there is, Apple stops updating old iOS operating systems after a certain point, and they effectively sunset the really old iOS operating systems by vintaging the iPhones that are stuck with them. So it's a long runway. Super long. iMessage only came out, I think, in 2011 or 2012. And it's probably just in the last few years that Apple could be certain that nobody is using iMessage, or functionally nobody is using the iMessage version that like they pushed out in 2015. But that's the kind of horizon they have to worry about when it comes to compatibility. So for them to do something drastic to increase the security, just even if they control every single client, is really goddamn hard. They've got to do version negotiations or capability negotiations between the different clients. If you're in a group chat, that means all the participants need to be able to handle the, because even though Apple relays the messages, they're effectively encrypted between the participants. So everyone needs to be on a new phone or a new, what's coming up in iOS 17.4 is this post-quantum cryptography level 3 on this level 5 or 5 level matrix that Apple invented to make itself sound smart. Apple's pushing that out now in part because it literally takes 10 years for the floor of interoperability to be high enough that you'd be able to reasonably confidently say that everyone in the conversation is using this new version of the protocol. And what does quantum cryptography really mean? Like, I'm not a quantum computing expert. I still get really confused about it. I like to watch videos about quantum computers and what quantum computing means because similar to an unobserved qubit, I will think I know, but then I will simultaneously not know. And I'll just keep on oscillating in that superposition of understanding and not understanding what the fuck any of this means or why it matters. So I'm not the guy to ask about, why it is that quantum computers break cryptography other than that they also break my brain. But it's a useful thing to bring up when you're also in a discussion around trying to force these messaging platforms to somehow be interoperable. Because if we've learned anything about protocols and interoperability, you have to have some least common denominator for everything to communicate. And if that least common denominator is I think people are comfortable about it when they think end-to-end encryption. But if the end-to-end encryption is based on, traditional, or older, like let's say 1024-bit RSA, public-private key pairs, right? Like an older standard with a high, a large key size. That is, would be agreed upon in a moment in time. And then 10 years, 15, 20 years would pass and it would take, and getting everyone to move forward in lockstep takes a lot of coordination, collaboration, and people's minds change. Maybe one party has a strategic or technical or legacy reason to be on, the old stuff. And it's just way, way harder to make a secure communications tool that also has to play well and interoperate with everyone else's. So I kind of felt like Apple throws security out as a FUD, as a fear, uncertainty, doubt, boogeyman in a lot of these kind of, policy discussions. But the fact that they're trying to push forward cryptography such that if somebody is listening to all your iMessages and like you got a man in the middle attack and they're collecting all the messages that are happening between you and somebody else, because like no one's got a quantum computer in their room. Well, some do, but not me. But somebody could just monitor all of the communication between two people and hold on to that traditionally encrypted messaging for months, years, decades. And then as soon as a quantum computer can easily, trivially break that encryption, then you can just load up that hard disk and say, ooh, I can read all these tawdry messages and from the days of yore in 2020. So anyway, it's good to get a standard that's significantly ahead of where technology will be, so that the window of how old of messages that were, stored at rest for a long period of time could be cracked. So I for one, embrace our quantum overlords. Thank you, Apple. Now for what I guess is today's main event. The reason that I felt compelled to get on the mic and tell you what for. And the explanation for this version's name, which is, what did I say that it was? Pausing doesn't pause, right? this goes out to Stripe. I'm realizing that, I used to tweet about bugs a lot. Then I'd write, when I stopped tweeting, I started writing blog posts about bugs, and it's not fun because you have to replicate the bug, which itself is very hard, reproduce it reliably so that you can get screenshots or videos. And then you take all that documentation and then you got to explain it. And then you got to kind of like at least craft a narrative of like how the bug might be manifesting or why, and what would the fix maybe look like. But doing that is work, and it doesn't pay. And people might think it's like, aha, funny. People, have come to know me for it. But it like, as I get older, I just don't have time for it. I'm like, everything's broken. Things are more broken than they ever were. Like, why am I spending time? Like, I took like 35 screenshots of this Stripe thing I'm about to talk about. And I was like, what am I going to do with this? Well, like, am I really going to like spend... Here's the reason, right? This bug caused me to waste several days of my life. Why would I give it more days of my life to write an awesome blog post takedown? Even if the corporation was going to see it, even if, it was going to move the needle, even if it was going to get my thing fixed, beyond a certain point, like, or I could just work around it like everyone else does and just say, fuck it. So, I'm not quite ready to just say, fuck it, but I am ready to go on a podcast and say, fuck those guys. Am I right? To at least try to like get this out of my body. So, welcome to our recurring segment, how a 1 hour task somehow consumed me for 3 days this week. Also, alternate title, how COVID broke Stripe, which is an interesting anecdote that I heard along the way. So I'm building this app for Becky that's, spoiler alert, it's a paid application. And if you want to take people's money on the internet, and you don't want to give away 10 to 30% of it to somebody else, Stripe is a great choice. Stripe is a popular choice, probably used by more merchants in the world online than anybody else, especially when you consider how Stripe Connect as a platform for other platforms enable so many businesses, small businesses, to collect credit card payments, bank payments, all sorts of shit online. Stripe's great. Stripe's really popular. Stripe is, because it's the incumbent, I come into my experience trying to get Stripe to work with an expectation that it is straightforward and simple, in part because they came out of the Ruby community and they had a reputation for having a really fucking rad API. Like, it was clear. It was like one of the first, if not the first company that was like an API company. And other ones came along too, like Twilio with being able to text and, now other stuff. But it was where the product was an API and the consumer was the developer or the engineering company that's building some piece of software. And it was that was the product. The API was the product. But increasingly, as they've kind of saturated the developer market, it is like they've had to branch into other things like low code or no code, where they're hosting the UI and their dashboard is kind of defining everything. All that's really good. It's just bigger now. And I asked some of my Rubyist friends, hey, I thought Stripe was awesome. And they're like, oh, it was so awesome, but like maybe only until 2013. And then it kind of got shitty because they had to slather on more mud because of legacy and new features that didn't quite fit. And so now the model used to be really tidy and straightforward, but like when you also have to like consider, like I think they do payment processing for like Alipay overseas. Like they have, they have to consider the like tax implications of like India in the same domain model that they do in Florida. There's like, I don't envy them. Payment processing is not just impossibly hard, but like it's probably more a matter of limiting liability and decreasing the overall size of fuck ups. In just even something that's conceptually simple as like add up the amount of payments and then the dollar amount, right? So I should have known this going in. So I came in maybe with too high of expectations. But one thing, and I talked about this last episode, that I was excited about was this new Link by Stripe product where for new apps, like if you go and you pay for a GPT Plus, this is the experience you get. You say, I want to pay for you $20 a month. And you click a button and it will, what I now know it's doing is it will call an API and create a new checkout session with the appropriate product. This is a subscription product that they want to sell you, quantity 1, maybe an email address pre-filled. And then it will redirect you to a Stripe hosted page, which can be on a subdomain. So I think it's like pay.openai.com. And then what you see is a Stripe UI. And the Stripe UI, the fact that it is a Stripe UI is wonderful for many reasons. One is it could remember your payment information, so it becomes effectively one click. But like additionally, it can handle collecting sales tax or VAT, or allowing you to do Apple Pay with no extra work, or allowing you to do ACH or pay through with your Square Cash account or whatever it is. You scroll through the list of like ways you can let people pay you, and it's absurd. So that's really neat, and I was excited to be using it. The other thing that's nice about that checkout UI is that it can sort of double as a billing portal. So you can just like for new purchases, you can tell people to go to this checkout. For existing customers, you can tell them, hey, I want to create a new session of the billing portal for this customer's ID. And if you have the settings set, which I do, of limiting each customer to one subscription at a time, then when they click through, they will go and see their currently active subscription. If they have one, they can edit their payment method. They can edit their billing information. And one of the things that they can do is they can cancel out of the box. You can cancel, look at the subscription, you can click cancel. I don't have to implement that entire, workflow. And I don't know for sure if this is on by default, but I think it was on by default for me. That or maybe Becky checked it in the dashboard before. But there's a pause feature in the dashboard. This is where I came to be aware of Stripe having a pause feature. And when you enable pausing, you as a customer now, I'm a customer. Instead of cancel, what if I don't want to what if cancel feels too dramatic? Like I want to keep learning this, if it was my Japan app, if this is how my Japan flashcard app, Kame-same, if I'd chosen to make that a paid product, I wouldn't want people to feel like they're canceling on their learning. So having a pause feature that says, hey, I can't afford it this month, or I'm not using it much this month or whatever, or the next 2 months, I'm going to be busy, having it pause automatically for 2 months and then come back in a couple months and restart the subscription, hopefully with notifications and so forth. That seems like a reasonable thing to want. And hey, look, just like all these other things that Stripe's UI does for you, you can pop in, click a button, and get that feature. So I had anticipated using this, and on around day, it didn't take me too long, like probably 2.5 days, I was very comfortable with the basic flow of the Stripe stuff. From zero, from having like no data model, no webhooks, no cron jobs yet, no understanding of like what the typical flow is, having never visited any of Stripe's API docs in all this time. So it was, I felt pretty good. My UI looked good. It gave you a manage button that would create a checkout session if there wasn't a subscription, or a billing portal if there was, and update the customer's information first to make sure that the state was right. So this pause feature, I just trusted it. I was like, of course, I know what pausing means. If I'm a customer and I'm pausing a subscription, I want it to resume after 2 months or 3 months. There are 2 ways that I could imagine that pause feature working sensibly. And this is what I was thinking through as I clicked it, and then observe what was happening over the API after having clicked it for an account. One way is, you could imagine a pausing the subscription immediately. So if I'm 15 days into a 30-day month-long subscription, and maybe I normally get charged on the 22nd. So I've got 15 more days, normally charged on the 22nd. So it's the 7th or whatever. And maybe it freezes immediately, that subscription. And maybe that means then when I unpause in 2 months, my subscription bill date moves out, accordingly. So if I was 15 days from being billed, then I would unpause whenever that unpause occurred. I'd still be 15 days out from getting billed. That way I'm conserving all of the money that I spent and not wasting a minute. as opposed to a cancel, which you should probably get paid, be able to use the product through the end of the currently paid period. That's probably, in my opinion, the best way to pause, because it says, hey, I really want to pause, and I will be back. I think that's the most customer friendly way to do it. But alternatively, if it's important, say, in the payment processor's data model, to have a pause mean this month is paid for, but then when I say pause for 1 month, what I'm really saying is pause for 1 period. So next month, what it does is it generates a void invoice by default. Next month, I will be paused. And then the month after that, I will come back and I will be charged again. That second way, also fine. I honestly didn't care. It was a curiosity until I looked at the API of the subscription object back from Stripe after a pause had occurred. And what was in the subscription object was the status was still quote unquote active. I was like, well, that's weird. And I looked through and there was, there's a pause collection thing. It says void the invoices and it says resumes on, and it gave me a timestamp. I was like, oh, okay, cool. So it knows it resumes on a certain time. And then I fast forwarded, to the end of the segment, assuming that maybe the pause starts at the end of the period. And so I fast forwarded a month. I basically had paused it indefinitely so I could test. And there's a test clock feature in Stripe where you can fast forward people into running a simulation of what will this account look like 3 months from now. So I fast forward at 3 months and there are 3 new invoices still on the same normal invoice day, all void, meaning $0. But the subscription status is still active. And it still says, resumes at, is either nil or a time, whichever, it doesn't matter. So now I'm thinking, okay, so the subscription stays active, even though there is a subscription status called paused. It turns out that subscription status is just for trialing customers who don't add a payment method. So if I'm on a trial and I don't add a payment method and then the trial ends, I am now in this paused state, which is fine by me. That's kind of what paused means. I'm in a sort of, I shouldn't have access to this thing yet, or the subscription, because I'm not paying for it. I'm not entitled to it. Why does it still say active? And if you go to, which I should have brought up, but in my commitment to myself, I did not prepare for this podcast. There's a documentation page, and the documentation page on pausing, it has nothing to do with what the user sees in their own fucking billing portal. It's about hey, if there's a handful of situations where you as a business want to just give away your services for free to one user or to all your users, or to temporarily halt operation so that you can't give your product away, right? Excuse me, you want to halt operation so you can't distribute the product that people are paying for. So you want to pause collections. So it's all about giving the product away for free or otherwise stopping collecting. You're pausing collecting dollar cash money on one user or all your users, which is that's sure. That sounds like a great feature. I don't know a lot of businesses who would be, champing at the bit to be hey, payment processor, please find me a way to just give my shit away for free. That would be great. And so I'm looking at that. I'm like, man, that makes no goddamn sense. And so I think about it. And then I think about all the other subscriptions I have that have this pause feature turned on in a Stripe checkout or billing portal UI. And I went to one and I clicked pause and I still had the service. And I was like, oh, fuck. I bet you no one else knows that pause doesn't mean pause, because when you pause in the dashboard, what you really did was you clicked the button that turns on the feature that's actually not designed for customers to control, but rather for businesses to control to give away the product for free. Now, it's true that I'm sure a non-zero number of very attentive developers building apps on Stripe's API will do the math and they'll look at it and they'll be like, okay, so is it an active subscription? Yes. Is pause collection non-null? Yes. Is there if so, that means they're paused. In that case, then I have to do another API call, list all that person's invoices. Is the invoice that covers the current period of time that I'm in, is it voided or is it paid? If it's paid, then you can give them the product. If it's not paid, then you can't. Then you withhold it. But that's like at least one more API call every time you want to answer the question of, is the subscription active? So how could that be? Like, so yes, I'm sure that very like good programmers, quote unquote, who are really on top of shit are intentionally turning this customer driven pause feature on. And then they are doing the work on the back end to make sure that like users aren't getting free access to their shit without paying. But path of least resistance and the fact that it says pause on it and sure looks like a customer focused feature and not referencing some business focused thing. I suspect that if you use any apps that have that like Stripe checkout UI, and you'll know it when you see it with the white on the right and the brand coloring on the left, and you've got the big red cancel or big black cancel or manage subscription, and if there's a pause button, I encourage you to pause it. Pause it indefinitely and see if you ever lose access to whatever you're subscribed to. Pro tip. It's the ultimate promo code. Really promo code. So I was really frustrated about this. And I Gary Bernhardt enters this conversation again. Gary runs executeprogram.com, which is honestly, if you're a beginner not beginner quite, but if you're like a sophomore at programming, Execute Program is a wonderful way to learn a new, it's a very interactive, very designed to help you memorize important concepts and lead you down a path of scaffolding those concepts in programming. There's a TypeScript course, a Python course, SQL, regular expressions, a whole lot of concepts that are useful for programmers that are like, non-trivial skills to pick up. He does Stripe, he has a self-hosted UI, and I was talking about needing this pause feature, and he was, pushing back on like, hey, pausing is actually kind of like an exploitative feature because you should just let users cancel and then make it really easy for them to uncancel, as opposed to like prey on the fact that they feel bad about canceling to like just necro the subscription 1 to n months later, to have it, kind of be a zombie and come back and start charging them again. They might not even realize, which I'm amenable to that argument for sure. But I was like, but really though, like, how did this feature ship? Stripe also has a Discord, not a Slack, that anyone can sign up for. And I think it operates on business hours. It's really cool. Like I could sign up, I could take an auto invite to this Discord. I could say in their dev help channel, hey, I got this question about how pausing works. And then they have like a dingling bot that I think round robins some number of support engineers and I got one whose name was codename Duchess, which I appreciated because it's an Archer reference. And this individual, I shared the problem with them. And like ultimately after 3 or 4 back and forths, it kind of like the conversation reached a natural end of like, this is just how it is, which from the perspective of a support engineer, regardless of how senior they are in the organization, this is a product design fuck up. Like I'll get to that in a second. Like I was frustrated. I texted Gary again. Gary says, now that you mentioned it, I remember that during COVID, I think they rolled this out then. I recall because during COVID, during the shutdowns like March and whatnot, all these companies stopped operating. Basically, you had to hit pause on them. And they Stripe and those companies did not want to experience churning 100% or 80% or some massive proportion of their subscriber base because new videos weren't going out or, the app wasn't working or whatever service they provided was unable to be, administered. And you couldn't just cancel them all. Like a bulk cancel and a bulk startup didn't make sense either. And so that's where the feature came from. It was an emergency patch, goes out right away. And that would explain why the naming is stupid and why the document doesn't make any sense and why it's kind of like it's a COVID euphemism now. Like, so like in the context of spring 2020 makes all kind of sense, scanning QR codes made all kinds of sense. But then similar to QR codes, we should have stopped doing it maybe after the emergency phase of the pandemic. Because now we live in a world where cheapskate restaurants don't want to give you menus anymore and where somebody built this thing called a billing portal on Stripe. And they were like, oh yeah, like there's a card on the card wall that the product owner wrote. And the product management people say that we should have a pause feature, so that you can pause your subscriptions. And this is Stripe. Now keep in mind, Stripe is the most successful payment processor on the planet. Full stop. They are the 800-pound gorilla that's earning 3% off the back of just about every single thing that you spend on the internet. So I'm not punching down here when I say, what kind of fucking moron grabs off the card wall a pause subscription feature for customers to click? I want to pause my subscription for 1, 2, 3, 4 months. And then rather than look at like what the code does, what the documentation for the code is, just does, Command P or Command T in his editor, their editor. I don't mean to target a particular engineer. It's a large company. This had to go through many, many people to hit production. It is still in production. And now it has become part of the cultural ether surrounding not only the company's support, but also if you search for this shit on Reddit, I was talking to ChatGPT 4 about this, and it's like, oh yeah, a lot of people are pissed about this. And here's a whole bunch of GitHub issues of people just being fucking confused. Cool, man. Thanks. So you grab the card off the card wall. I realize no one uses actual Agile card walls anymore, but this is a podcast and I need a gesture to make, and I'm my thumb and finger are plucking on an index card, taking a little thumbtack. I'm looking at the front. It says, as a user, I want to be able to pause my subscription for a few months and be able to select how long and not be charged. And you flip it over to the back, and the acceptance criteria, has this UI. I can click it myself. I can set the time. I can set no time. And then during that time, I'm not charged. And some developer, they sit down at their computer and they hit Command P and they type pause, and they see, oh, look, we've already got a whole bunch of Ruby classes or a whole bunch of Golang or Rust or whatever the fuck about pausing subscription products. That's what I want to do here. Neat. And I could there's already a thing called pause. And this is a thing about naming and why naming an organization in code is so important. If you pick a name that might have multiple meanings and you claim the top level namespace for that word, like pause in this case, I suppose, it means that if anyone else needs a similar or same named thing, like a homonym, in the future, they have to either organize it in some broom closet like customer driven : pause, or billing portal : pause capital B, but not the other kind of pause, or come up with a totally different name altogether. And obviously for customer facing, end user facing concepts, it's more important to get the naming right, because people, end users will see it, but also you're not going to convince the world that this isn't called pausing a subscription. You're not going to say you're not going to put the word chillax on the button and say, oh yeah, I'm just going to chillax this subscription for, 1 to 3 gargle gooks. You're not going to educate the populace on some new lingo, but you've already got a class called pause. And so the developer looks at it, and developers in general, I think, don't think about this problem, how just of paramount importance code organization and naming is, and of what are the consequences of picking too good of a name that you box out other uses of the name. If I had been asked to make the first feature, really, it's China's fault for leaking the coronavirus out of that Wuhan lab. But a close runner-up is the Stripe developer who probably just named this fucking thing pause. Now, granted, everyone was having a tough time in March 2020 or whenever. But whoever called it pause for the purposes of this emergency feature really should have namespaced the code in a folder and with in a parent module named emergency COVID response shit. And then like I've got a Ruby gem called to do or die. I would have had that gem in there and I would have said, this class or this method, to do or die on, and then given it a date a few months out so that the code path would blow up in development and test mode. Like when I was running my tests, to force me to think, do I still need this? Is this worth keeping around? But like keep the name. So like it's such an exceptional case, give it an exceptional name. Because then what happens is a couple years later, a normal case comes around, but the normal name that's obvious is already taken. This is what pausing subscription should be, is what the customer wants to do, is I don't want to pay for this. And I also expect that I will not for free receive the product that I am not paying for. But developer picks the card off the wall, sees those acceptance criteria, plugs in this pause thing, and it literally does those things. It literally stops collecting payments. The user interface does what the card says it should do. And oh yeah, it just means that the merchants have no real functional way of knowing whether or not an active subscriber should be receiving the service or good. Or what are we even doing here? Like, this is such a stupid goddamn bug and such a colossal product management fuck up that I don't know what. This is entering you had one job territory. And I don't mean to sound, like I said, Stripe's really big. I'm being pretty goddamn brusque here because they're the 800-pound gorilla. I am not, as far as I know, punching down at Stripe. I am fucking flabbergasted that this ever shipped and that this is still there and that this is like a feature that is very prominent, if not turned on automatically. Maybe it wasn't a default. Maybe Becky just clicked it. Give them the benefit of the doubt. Pause doesn't mean pause if you're a Stripe merchant or a customer on their billing portal. Pause means, oh fuck, COVID just happened. I got to give my shit away for free or otherwise not collect payment or my business ends. I use the word pause sometimes in colloquial, in conversation. And I, for whatever reason, am almost always using it the first way and never the second way because it's not goddamn fucking COVID anymore. These motherfucking idiots. I'm sorry. That was too much. I already referenced that there was a complaint earlier to the podcast about swearing, but I am expressing passion because Stripe and a lot of its engineers made fuck tons of money at that IPO. And a lot of them walked out the door, retired early. Good for them. But what are they like? You have a social responsibility, like, to the world when you corner a market and you're the only real show in town to just like do the thing and give a fuck. Like when you miss it, when you just beef it this fucking hard and nobody knows, like no one, this isn't documented. There's not a blog post out there that's like, hey, FYI, pausing isn't pausing. There are some that are like, here's a way to work around it, or here's how to back into trying to ascertain and discern whether or not a subscription is active, but not actually active. And it's by like loading up these invoices, like I was saying. Like that's a workaround. And what is software development except for sins of the past coming back to haunt us? And us as the next generation, the next people in the door, having to just clean house, work around it, deal with it, up on that 14th story of the Jenga tower as the foundation starts to crumble below. Like, there's a reason this industry spits people up and chews people out. Wait a second. You know what I mean. In proportion to how much they give a shit. Like, I look at this and I'm just like, how did this happen? And not only how did it happen, how is it still happening? And how is it that when I bring this up with support, I get, that's just how it is. And systemically, my career, all it did was show me, like, this is what the system does. Of course, everyone's individual incentives are exactly playing out just as you'd expect. Like, no one's going to get a bonus for like figuring this thing out. And systems, and if you read like D.W. Deming or any sort of systems thinking stuff, like you have to be an incredibly conscientious organization to be thinking about how do I reward like the red team in my organization to kind of find shit like this and fix it. That even though it exists completely outside the main feedback loop of how the business makes money or how it grows. So I get it. I know why this isn't fixed. But maybe if there are remote Stripe workers in Argentina, somebody here is listening. Because Jesus goddamn Christ. Maybe I'll just release this transcript. So that maybe then somebody Googling for this will find this. I might need a minute. Good. You know what? I went on this big old rant and I forgot to give the caveat that I could be totally wrong. I could just be misunderstanding everything. Maybe this had nothing to do with COVID. That was just a thing that Gary suggested or remembered. Maybe the feature makes a complete amount of sense. And if it does, I apologize. And I would love for somebody who's used Stripe and knows how this shit works to enlighten me and correct me. And I will spend version 7 of this podcast singing your praises and apologizing and, 49 lashes and all that shit. I realize I've gone full-blown AM radio. And I told myself this morning, I'm not going to go full-blown AM radio today. But here we are. So yes, caveat. I have a bad habit of coming into a new product or a new framework or a new technology, scoping out the joint, using it in anger for 3 minutes, and then deciding that everyone involved is a fucking moron. Some of you have seen me do this in the past. It's a bad habit. But I feel like I did more tire kicking this time around than usual before getting on the air. And I'm pretty sure this is just pausing ain't pausing. So yeah, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, ask them, hey, do you know anything about the Stripe API? And also, while you're at it, go into every single subscription you have and click pause and see what happens. That's how this gets fixed. Is we start a movement of pausing everyone's subscriptions until somebody fucking gives a call. Once again, I'll take a second. Apologize for the strong language. Anything there that sounded ad hominem, that's not my intention. I feel like the bigger you are as a company, the greater your responsibility to execute the core of your business. Not only, not at a level of excellence, not, I don't expect boutique curated, I don't expect McDonald's to be serving Wagyu burgers just because they're big. In fact, the bigness is why they can't. But if I go up to a McDonald's tablet and I put in an order and I add French fries to my cart, and then in the checkout screen I hit cancel, the tablet doesn't just spit out free French fries every month for the rest of my life. I mean, maybe it does. That would be great. But when the payment processor Stripe is probably bigger than every single company that uses Stripe for payments, or just about, they're effectively robbing all those small and medium businesses of significant amounts of revenue because they didn't think through this feature, because they left it up, because they built a support system that insulates them from escalating this kind of feedback or even recognizing that it is so far the only direct outreach that I've done is that chat thread, and I'm talking to somebody who seemed very, very smart, that like the purpose of this pause feature was this temporary free service. And the docs do say that. That's what the docs say from the merchant side. But that's not what the UI says on the billing portal, and it's not what like it is presented to customers. And of course, it makes zero sense why you'd give a merchant-facing emergency feature to customers. It's obvious how this happened. It's a pretty clear line of sight. I just wish more people gave a shit. Not just doing a good job, not just writing good code and writing good tests, but like you pick up a thing that somebody asks you to do and you think hard about it. And you don't just think literally of like, oh, user must be able to click pause. User must be able to select an optional amount of time to pause. User must, after clicking pause, the state of the pause collection must happen. You know, then the subsequent invoice would be void or whatever. Like read the like literal thing. You got to think about like, what's it really mean? You know, what else might have to happen? Because if you've done any amount of software development, it is the developer's responsibility to educate product people or business people who are non-technical about all of the other little myriad consequences and externalities and gotchas and the goes intos that like might be impacted by what sounds like a trivial surface level feature. Well, yeah, we could do that, but we'd have to like, you know, completely re-architect the database. And so we're really good at it when we're really good at kicking up the dust of why something's hard to do when those externalities give us, you know, an excuse for why things are going to take us longer or that it's not a good idea to do them. We're really bad when a feature looks easy to implement as described to nevertheless throw a wrench in the gears and say, actually, even though maybe me selfishly as a developer, maybe I am under right now, performance reviews are big. A lot of HR departments and a lot of large tech companies, I haven't looked up Stripe and if they're laying people off, but like HR developments are on alert to performance manage people who work at product companies that hire too many people over COVID. And one of the number one ways, because HR folks are typically also not engineering management experts, is look at the productivity, look at how many PRs they close or how many lines of code they write or how much they comment on reviews and like, if you want to be as results based as you can be, how many features do they get out the door? If I have the opportunity to demonstrate, maybe I'm on a PIP or something, or maybe I just want to get in the next promotion, I'm able to demonstrate like I can get a feature out the door. The system is going to push me to take the layup. Why would I think the hard thought? Why would I let that hard thought lead me to tell the product owner it's actually got to be more complicated than it might initially sound? Why would I then, still having grabbed that card that is now bigger than anyone budgeted for it to be, do all of that work and slow myself down such that my whole OKR is now fucked because this quarter I didn't get anything done except for this one feature that everyone in the business thought would take a day? And it's not like product, like they, you know, yes, it is their responsibility, I suppose, to keep in mind, like existing features and what they were there for and so forth. Like you should, you know, no product is so massive that a reasonable product expert over the, you know, whose domain is the care and feeding of that product shouldn't have their arms around all of this. So yeah, I guess product failed in that sense. But if you look at it through, through their lens, maybe that when they wrote the stuff, like, you know, the engineer is asking them, hey, give me the short stories. Don't give me a full blown spec. Don't write 500 pages into a Jira ticket. Just give me the highlights. Maybe in their head, they're thinking like, yeah, this has nothing to do with the COVID pause. In fact, if you ask them, does this have to do with the COVID pause? They'd say no. It's that the conversation never happened. Ron Jeffries, one of the Agile Manifesto signatories, I think it was Ron, would say, that those little index cards, like, and you know, I'm talking about index cards, right? I'm referring to Agile, but like if you have GitHub issues or if you use Jira or whatever, like same shit. Any description of like a user story or a feature is a promise to have a conversation. That's it. If you think software is going to get built and be good because you threw some shit over the fence, wiped your hands clean, and now it's the next guy's job in the, you know, industrial dystopia of like treating software like a manufacturing process, then I don't know what to tell you. Like, this is what you get. If you view it as a collaborative exercise, like if I was working in a product company, like as an engineer, my best friend is now this product person. I want to get inside their head. I want to not only know what they want. I want to know why they want it. I want to know what their incentives are. I would ask them straight up, what's your bonus based on? What does the business want from you? What does it mean for you to get a promotion? I would care more fucking about that than I'd care about my own career goals. Because if I know the person who's directing my work, if I know the headspace of that person, then when they say a sentence, users should be able to pause in the billing portal, then I will be able to detect with nuance when I need to ask the follow-up. If I got to know them even better, understand their mannerisms, get to know them as a friend, understand what personal stresses might they be under right now. You know, like I've seen product people are pinched, you know, like product people are like John Boehner in 2011, trying to negotiate the sequester with Barack Obama. They have a debt ceiling standoff, and John Boehner goes to the White House and he spends 8 hours with Obama and Biden talking about here's what the deal looks like. And now we fast forward and we can see like this was, I think, a prelude to things to come in terms of how Congress operates. Boehner didn't have the full faith of his caucus, and so he wasn't able to actually negotiate. He could just show up and have a conversation and be like, yeah, I agree with you, but caucus will never go for it, or I could bring it to them. And so then instead of being able to actually hash things out in person and arrive at real decisions, he would just, you know, take his car back and forth to the Hill and have the same conversation with a different audience, come to a different outcome, come back to the White House, and then like nothing happens. And you could see this happening in real time. It was a complete breakdown of institutional, like negotiating, what do you call it? Like mechanics. Like it was impossible. It's like you're slapping each other with wet noodles. It's just, nothing was going to happen. There was no tension in the rope, I guess, to actually arrive at like, this is the halfway point. And so you wind up with nonsense, which is where we wound up. Product owner is the same fucking thing, right? Like the product owner in a startup is very often the founder. And so that's like nice because they have a lot of authority. There's not somebody over them who's telling them what to do. But like if they're a VC backed company, even then they probably got a lot of pressure that they feel from investors and from advisors. But in a big company, product managers are like, I think that there is a newfound respect for the discipline in terms of mechanically, like what are good practices and what's a good kind of person in this role. But like when again, this is another agile thing, I suppose. Like when we think about like, why did Scrum fail? A lot of people point to, or why did extreme programming like not really take off? In my opinion, the fulcrum of failure was always this imagined product owner. It was an abdication of like how reality really is and respecting that for a fantasy that like in a medium to large business, you'd have a product manager person who would not only know the product, not only know what would be good for the product in terms of what's good for the business and the ROI that they're trying to get on software, but have the authority to actually make a fucking decision that matters. because I don't know what to tell you. Like 99 out of 100 times that I've been in a non-trivial conversation with a product owner or product manager about like a really thorny thing where like the right thing to do is going to blow their timeline, or the thing that they're literally being not that they're asking for, but that they're being told to ask for, or told to scope out, or told to break down into smaller bits that, you know, developers with our little baby mouths can chew on them. Told that's actually 10 times bigger than they think, and it just blows their budget. Or when they're handed a direction for the product that is very obviously, to anyone who's paying attention, you know, being higher up in an organization doesn't make you smarter. It doesn't make you like, you might have more experience or whatever, but like really all you have is more authority. And if you're a middle manager, product owner, and like you're being given the wrong direction from leadership, like it's leadership's job to set the direction. And if you're just like, you know, Joe developer listening and you're like, well, this direction is going to lead us off a fucking cliff. The product owner, what do they say? Is the same thing I heard in the customer support chat. That's just how it is. Like, so I guess it's maybe a good thing that we've moved from product owner as a term and more to product manager, because it's never been an owner. And it's never been a successful collaboration model because product managers typically have no power and no authority to decide. And sometimes they do. If I was a product manager, if I was advising somebody who wanted to go into product management, I'd be like, you got to go to a company that's going to give you the actual authority to actually make decisions and hard calls. And there will be a scope, there will be an interface between you and leadership. But like, whether it's you own the GL for this product or for this business unit, or it's a series of rules and norms about like, here's what me as leadership can tell you to do and not tell you to do, or here's the data that you provide me in terms of costs and outcomes and revenue or something. And I don't get to meddle at a lower level of abstraction than that. You know, actually equip them and give them authority. Then that might be a good product management role. I am unsure if there's a product manager role at any non-trivially large company that's like, as I just described, because that's more like, you know, a director or VP level role probably in most companies. And those people, because they've got 35 fucking Zooms a week, they probably don't have time to be the product owner. And that's how the product owner role actually ended up shaking out, or product management roles. It's like somebody who doesn't already have 30 hours of meetings a week to go and have 30 more hours of meetings a week. Don't call them a project manager. Like, you take the Gantt chart away, you take the scoping and the estimation nonsense and the pseudo management of engineers away. But like, that wasn't the problem. The problem was somebody in the room who has the authority and expertise and perspective to actually make a fucking decision and own it through to completion, own it through to consequence, and course correct. And that's the failure that probably happened here. So anyway, was hoping to feel better after getting that off my chest, but I don't. Moving right along, let's talk about video games. Recommendations for this episode. I started playing because it hit Game Pass. A popular game from a couple years ago called Arcade Paradise. You play a 80s punk whose father has you working at a laundromat that the father owns, and you have to, you know, clean. It's like a wash and fold, I guess. Although you don't fold. But like, laundry shows up, you put it in the laundry machine, you wait 2.5 minutes. You put it in the dryer, you wait 2.5 minutes. You put it on the table at the end of the day when it's done, and then you get ranked based on how long that takes. And then the trash piles up. You pick up the trash. Gum gets stuck to things. You pull the gum. Your trash bag gets full. You drop it in the dumpster. But it has the twist of there's some arcade games in the back, and you realize like, oh, I could just like also unlock the store and let people play arcade games and collect money from the arcade games. And I could like reorganize them and have more popular games be over by the less popular games to give them a boost. And I can go online, I can order new cabinets and add new games, and all the games are made up. Like they're evocative of 80s arcade games, and puzzles and stuff. There's one called Stack Overflow where you're literally stacking boxes and to match a pattern. It's really cute. And it's like a weird business sim, because then you pretty quickly are doing the math on like, would I make more money forgetting the laundry and just letting it pile up and focusing squarely on just playing a lot of this game to make it more, the more you play a game, the more popular it gets. So like, that's the only incentive to play the games, because of course the points don't matter or whatever. And so the more you play it, the more it'll generate typically. Anyway, beautiful game too. Like a really great art. Yeah. So Arcade Paradise, maybe I'll go play some of that. Cool off. Their payment processor is coins. You put coins in the box, and if you pause putting coins in the box, you don't get to fucking play anymore. It's that second of the two definitions of pause that I shared earlier. For fuck's sake. Also, recommendation: The Killer, Netflix, Michael Fassbender, David Fincher. If you like those things, watch The Killer. It's fine. It's more of a tonal piece than something I'm going to walk away from and be like thinking about its story ever again, but it's fine. One thing that stood out to me in the movie though is there's like towards the end, Michael Fassbender gets a trial membership to Equinox, but instead of Equinox, because it's like a murder-in film, it's a nonsense other one called Balaquox or something like that. And I don't know if it's meant to be a joke, but it was a silly looking word. And it reminded me of Bally Total Fitness. I had my teacher, I had the same teacher for 3 calendar years, but because of block scheduling and me taking 6 math classes the first 3 years of high school, I think I had her for 4 of them. And so Miss Jonick and I got to know each other really well. And when I was a junior, she invited me and a friend to go to the Bally Total Fitness that she worked at as a yoga instructor, go to a yoga class. And I was embarrassed. I sat in the back, and I only went once. Might be the only yoga class I ever properly went to outside the context of just being in a hotel and board that maybe had a yoga lesson or something. And ever since, because we did a lot of group work in her classes, I came up with a joke team name, because you got to come up with like a project team name. And so I would always name my project teams for the rest of high school and all of college. And I hadn't thought about this in years, but the Balaquox from The Killer made me think of it. The name was Team Bally Total Fitness Extreme Racing. And I don't remember, my brain just works that way. I don't remember where I picked that up. Maybe if I Google it, it's like literally a reference to some cartoon. But I always liked it because I could get a sensible chuckle out of somebody, and it also didn't fit on forms nicely. So The Killer is a movie. A couple of mailbag things. We're right up, pushing on 2 hours. Jason asks, wondering if your podcast feed supports web mentions? I believe Mastodon does, so simply sharing a link in a Mastodon post should trigger a web mention callback to the podcast URL. And it would be a way for your podcast feed to collect public comments. Kind of like, I think that's like pings, right? Like link backs. Though you'd have to ensure the canonical feed URL is the one that has the web mention metadata. And then a parenthetical edit. Later investigation says no, Mastodon doesn't implement them, which surprises me. So Jason, he asked and answered his question inside of the email. Thank you, Jason. So no, the podcast doesn't support web mentions. It is a static site. It's a Hugo site. It's all static generated. So there's no data source for shit like that, like for a webhook to call back to. I could make one, I guess. It would be neat to see who's linking to my stuff generally, I think. Like the blog, because like if I'm not on social media, I'm sort of just shouting into the void. but I'm also fine with that. So I don't know if you got a good web mention strategy for static site generators like Hugo, maybe there's a service that does this nicely, that I could just, slurp down and then maybe periodically have those republish into the site. Well, that would be pretty neat. So podcast@surls.co. Thank you, Jason, for mailing me. I'm going to skip this next one. It's too heavy. Maybe next time. Got to come off this. Pick up the next. Matt asks, why are so many engineers and tech people obsessed with Costco? I was unaware of this, and yet I am obsessed with Costco. So maybe I'm part of the problem. And yet I had a free membership to Sam's Club, and I never wanted to go there because my dad had one. Why did I like Costco more? I don't really know. I mean, like most of them, they're basically the same thing. A warehouse where they mostly make the money on subscriptions. Costco, I think if I had to try to draw the Venn diagram here in my mind, what is it about the stereotypical programmer mind and liking Costco? I think there's an efficiency to it. First of all, the ruthlessness of it's just a warehouse. There's no dressing. There's no, they don't sell you shit really on upsells and end caps and, organizing and layout and psychological tricks. I think developers in general have become very sensitive to those because we're the ones making them everywhere, as we hire half the world's psychologist majors to try to figure out how to prevent churn in SaaS apps, despite how pause buttons sometimes don't work. So there's that. There's, I think, just essentialism and minimalism. You don't want a company to make the profit on each good you buy. You'd rather pay for a membership to get good access to goods, right? At cost or nearly at cost. So I think there's a certain purity there too. Also quite unlike the zero margin hellscape that is SaaS. I think there's the same kind of programmer bent that's really into Soylent. I'm going to only own, and this is again me, 6 of the same t-shirt, 6 of the same underwear, and 6 pairs of white socks. Costco is great for that. I'll just buy those 3 things in 6 packs and never think about them again. Whereas a normal clothing retailer wouldn't really do it for me. There's that. With food, same thing, right? You just buy bulk the things that you eat and you eat the same thing every day. I think it scratches a particular itch that is, often associated with, not clinical autism, but people referencing it in a sort of pop, inappropriate, non-pathologized sense, or OCD or whatever. Same story. So yeah, it fits that stereotype, I guess. I think there's also I wonder if there's anything to the $1.50, the fact that the prices haven't gone up on the rotisserie chickens or the hot dogs. Obviously, that's a strong talk about psychological design at Costco. It's a strong retention tool for them to keep people on the membership because they're membership kind of pays for itself because I eat 10 of those rotisserie chickens a year every time I go and get the hot dog and soda for $1.50. I wonder if there's a programmer hook there. Good question. Hopefully this was a satisfying answer, Matt. I appreciate you. Checking around. Josh asks, any weird interactions or comments from other people on the plane, presumably when I was flying with my Vision Pro, including but not limited to flight attendants? I'm hoping to travel with mine and want to be prepared. Well, in version 4 of this ongoing series, I discussed what it was like flying on a plane. I discussed that the flight attendants were a little too into it, at least in weekend 1. I, for travel purposes, the only thing I'd add, I guess, is figuring out how you want to travel with it in advance. I think the dual loop band is probably about as portable as you're going to get. So I'd probably travel with that one. I would not bring if a NASA astronaut laid an egg, that's what the very large Apple travel case looks like. I would probably just stick it in raw in the bag, face down with enough socks around it, and it'll be fine. I might get a lens cover. So there's for the Quest, I'm sure it's a similar size. Ideally, it would be a perfect fit or it would be magnetic. Something to cover the lenses. That's the only thing I'm really worried about. Like the front glass gets scuffed. I don't care really. And plus it has the really nice sock for the front. So I'd probably travel with that, I guess. But because it would add some extra cushion as well if you put it, I put it in the bag face down. But putting something in front of the lens. I only worry about the lens because then anything else in the bag that's above the Vision Pro, if it gets thrown in the same compartment, could scratch lenses. So there are products for that, and that's probably the only thing that I would add to my loadout. So that's my best effort at responding to this. Sorry, I guess I read a question that I'd already kind of answered, but I did the requisite 3 mailbags. I need more. The mailbag is running dry. I've only got a dozen or so other things, and maybe if I haven't read them yet, it's time for a refreshing. So if anything comes up, if you've got web mention stuff, if you've got Stripe stories, if you've got a favorite cooperative game for the Sega Genesis or the Super Nintendo, if you've got a way to make a HomePod receive a phone call or otherwise allow a family member to ring all the HomePods in the house in the event that they have to get people's attention, you let me know. Apart from intercom, I already talked about that. All right. I have exerted everything that I can, and I'm going to go away now.